we just leave it in because it makes it more.
Yeah.
But let's talk heresy.
Oh man, my favorite topic.
So I guess introduce yourself for our people.
Yeah, so I'm best known on TikTok as CaptainDadPool 86. I'm an atheist with a degree in biblical theology. I was a devout Christian for 15-ish years, and I deconstructed as a result of my education and ultimately left Bible college with more questions than I went into having. So yeah, ultimately I just stopped believing in everything. And now I make content explaining some of the origins of Christianity, what the Bible actually says, and doing a little bit of counter-apologetics on the side.
And was that atheist convention the first one you've spoken at?
Oh, I did. I spoke at the 2022 Atheist Convention and the 2023 Atheist Convention.
Nice.
Yeah, the 2022 was my first public speaking engagement. I was a nervous wreck, but it went very well.
Sure.
I got nothing but positive feedback from it. Yeah, it was very cool. I was invited to that because I had a bunch of people request to have me as a speaker, and I got this email. It was like, "Hey, do you want to come speak at here?" And I was like, sure. I guess.
I mean, I was definitely part of the fan base who, you just disappeared on to us on TikTok.
Oh, I'm sorry about that.
So that's why when you pop back up, I was like, I gotta remember to contact him immediately because I already had you written down on a list. I'm like, I haven't seen your content in a while, and I was like, while it's here before it goes away again.
Yeah, I lost motivation to make content for a while, and then summer came around, which y'all probably know I have 4 small kids, which means they were no longer in school, so they're home all day every day. So it makes it very hard to make content. And I made a video about that, hey, I'm probably going to be MIA for a while. But I think I got bitten by the bug again, and I really want to get back to making content. I'm just waiting for, school to start back up, which happens on the 24th. They go back to school. So hopefully in the next couple of weeks, I'll be able to be pumping out more regular content.
It's coming. That's great. So can you, I'm not as familiar with your channel. Michael's the one who found it and showed it to me. I have looked and I think it's awesome. But first of all, I think for irony's sake, it should be now called an atheist congregation rather than a convention. Just. But can you actually talk about what that is, where it happened and all that? What is the atheist convention? I can assume what it's about, but what's your explanation of it?
Yeah, the American Atheist Convention is it's a nonprofit organization that started a few decades ago with a character named Madeleine O'Hare. There's an episode of CIS about her. There's a documentary about her. She's the one that started the organization, and she started it by fighting against she had kids who went to school, and she learned that her kids were being forced to pray after the Pledge of Allegiance. So she was a very in-your-face type character, and she fought against that. She was like, my kids shouldn't have to be forced to pray after the Pledge of Allegiance. And she ultimately won. And this made her quote unquote the most hated woman in America. She was eventually kidnapped and killed along with her son. She was not the best person either. She did some very sketchy things behind the scenes. It's a whole thing. But she started something, and then it was taken after she passed. It was taken over, and now, currently, it's being run by Nick Fish, who is just one of the coolest guys I've ever met in my life. He's one of the best friends with Andrew Seidel, if y'all know who he is. But all that to say, the organization fights to maintain the separation of church and state. They have representatives in every state. I'm the representative in Pennsylvania. And each state has its own struggles and own dealings with those. And I know in Texas they're losing their minds over there trying to fight. Basically, so as a state representative, you fight certain legislation that is aiming to enforce church influence over state legislation, educational curriculum, things like that. So the organization is there to fight against those things, and it's run by attorneys who are some of the coolest people you ever met, some of those competent people you ever met, and they're on the front lines and fight for those things that you don't hear about very often. But yeah,
Right.
so that's basically what the organization is.
I'm glad you
And
asked.
every year they have it at a convention.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I didn't know the background of that. That's actually super cool. So does that mean that you like pay attention to the legislation going on locally for you to like engage with it? Okay.
I try to. Yeah.
That's great. So that kind of brings up my second question for you. So I've seen on lots of social media platforms many people who went to Bible college, who went to religious studies, and fell off, for lack of a better term.
Yeah.
Or, grew out of it, whatever you want to call it, is it, I'm assuming it's more common than the populace thinks. Does this happen a lot?
Yeah, it is more common than the populace thinks, and it's more common than the individuals themselves are willing to put out there publicly, because a lot of these Bible colleges, these kids are put in there because their parents are alumni of these colleges. They're missionary kids, they're pastors' kids, what have you. So their parents are paying for them to go to this college. So they go to the school, and they may not really want to be there, but they're like begrudgingly go anyway. And some of them like maintain the faith, so to speak. But a lot of them do like deconvert, but it's not so easy for them to publicly renounce it. That's why you have organizations like the Clergy Project, which is an organization that helps people who are actively working as pastors or ministers or missionaries, what have you, that helps them leave that, that field, because that's their livelihood. You have a family and everything. You can't just say, oh, I'm done with the church now. So you have organizations like the Clergy Project that helps you with that. But yeah, it is much more common than I think people realize, for sure.
Sure. Yeah, and it's interesting that you mentioned, I didn't even think about the fact that these people are going to school to, lead parishes and whatnot. They're solidified in that role, more or less.
Yeah.
Because I come from the background. I grew up Catholic.
Oh yeah.
So have a religious upbringing. I'm Catholic on paper, I like to say. So
it's like on paper.
Yeah. And I think of it as a layperson, kind of figuring things out and kind of leaving that scenario. But I didn't realize how daunting it can be for someone who's more or less pushed into it, or who decides to go into it, puts themselves in that spot. And it's gotta take a whole system to leave. It's like a witness protection program of sorts.
Yeah, kind of. That's a good way to put it. Yeah, like these people, their entire family is involved in ministry and missions works, and they're like, you're going to go to the school, you're going to become a missionary like I am, and you're going to go to Ethiopia or whatever, and that's your only option. So, and they're like, whether they want to or not, they get there, they get into it, and they're like, I don't really want to do this anymore. But what option do they have after that? They kind of have to follow through. So they kind of fake it till they make it type of thing. I know a few people have done that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's for a total lack of any other option.
And then this is the first time, or today's the first day I saw your pinned TikTok about like the intricacies of leaving the faith, about the grieving process, about dealing with like the separation of like your old identity and new identity. I thought that was
Yeah.
super insightful because people think like, oh, you just change your mind and like lose your faith. It's like it is so much more than that to people. It's why it's not so easy to do. Besides the external things, there's a whole internal world that you built that you need to tear apart and build something on.
Yeah. Yeah, you go through a full-blown like identity crisis when you deconstruct from a religion, because your entire identity is lumped in with all that. I am a child of God. God has chosen me for this purpose in ministry. He has a plan to prosper me, not to harm me, blah blah blah, and I have a reward waiting for me in the afterlife, blah blah blah. It's like that's your entire life. And then once you start to realize this is all, are we allowed to cuss? Are you going to cuss?
Oh yeah. Oh,
This is our podcast. We never do the fuck we want.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Just making sure. I like to make sure. So once you realize that that's all bullshit, you have one of two options. You can either try and like force yourself to stay in this sort of mindset, or you can explore this path, and which would ultimately lead to deconstructing. But then that path is a lot harder. It's a lot harder. If you choose to just gaslight yourself to death, life is easy. You've got a whole support network behind you. They're going to tell you you're doing God's work. You've got a reward waiting for you in the afterlife. It's all good. It's a much easier option. The other option is, I can't reconcile this with the data that I now have. I don't have any other choice than to say this is all bullshit. So what's going to happen is that entire support network is going to reject you. They're going to kick you out. They're going to say like you just wanted to go and sin or whatever, what have you. So your entire family, friends could isolate you as a result of that decision you made. So when guys like fucking Frank Turek, he just posted this today, so it's fresh on my mind. He's like, people who deconstruct are only doing it for like sexual reasons. Like, bitch, you don't fucking understand. You don't understand. You lose everything when you leave your religion. And I myself, as a straight white guy, I didn't lose that much. It was not that hard for me to do. Right? But for other people that are not straight white guys, they lose a lot more by making that decision.
Sure.
So it's like, absolutely get fucked.
Man, and shout out to, that's such a hypocrisy. I can't stand hypocrisy, because shout out to all the people who just get married for sexual reasons, right? Like that's not okay.
Yep. That's a big thing too.
Oh yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Whole nother, oh God.
Well, you could just soak.
Right.
Duh.
Yeah, just soak, jump soak,
Oh my goodness. Yeah. Let's not go into explaining. Google that one, folks.
Yeah, just look that up on your own time.
Yeah. Yep. Oh, so are you okay with some personal questions? Maybe you have videos on this already, so you can direct people to that.
I'm an open book. Go for it.
But how, sound like such a, like, let me put on the Freudian thing. How's your relationship with your parents? I'm going to go deep right away. So
yeah, sure. My relationship with my parents didn't really have anything to do with it.
Okay.
My mom is like spiritual. She kind of believes in some otherworldly power, but she's not like devoutly Christian. My parents divorced when I was 3, and I was raised by my mom. My dad is like a hardcore conservative Republican, but he's not religious at all.
Okay.
It's kind of weird. So like my mom always like supported me, and like when I became a Christian in high school and I got like hardcore into the Jesus freak movement, and she pretty much supported me in that. And she supports me now. Because
yeah, sounds like a good mom.
I don't really have any issues in the family department.
That's wonderful. So with that being in mind, because you already mentioned a lot of folks go into this kind of thing from a family perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And it sounds like you did not necessarily. So what, stop me or redirect, obviously, if this gets to a weird place. But, was this like did you have friends that was this like a cultural thing? Like your tribe suddenly became a little more Christianized, or what's your journey with that?
What do you mean my tribe became Christianized?
Like, like
Because you mentioned,
teenagers are,
and you
if one-
mentioned like for a lot of people it's family, but so you hit high school. So what was the influence like within the high
Oh
school
yeah,
sphere?
okay,
Yeah,
gotcha.
yeah.
Cool, yeah. So like in high school, I was a very awkward teenager. I was very weird, goofy. And I
No
was
idea
like,
what that's like.
yeah. And I was very thirsty for that social acceptance or that sense of social acceptance. And one day I was invited to a youth group, which I had been to church before. So I was comfortable. I was like, yeah, I'll go check out this youth group. But this youth group was nothing like I'd ever experienced before. There was a live rock band. There was like a fog machine and strobe lights and a snack bar and like foosball and air hockey, like the works. The fucking
Holy
works.
Spirit was present
Right?
that day.
And I was like, this is church? Are you serious? But above everything else, there was a bunch of like other crazy ass teenagers like myself running around. Like, hey, so glad to see you here, man. I appreciate you come and join us. Yeah, you come come sit over here with me. So I was like, oh, okay. So I sort of got this like sense of social acceptance that I had been craving all this time, but didn't really realize it at the time. And yeah, so that kind of hooked me for a while, and I instantly became like hooked on the culture and hooked on the Bible. I studied the Bible like all day, every day, as much as I possibly could, because I thought that would elevate my status in that social hierarchy. All things I didn't realize I was doing at the time, but like looking back on it now, I'm like, yeah, that's absolutely what I was doing.
Yeah, and that makes sense. I mean, kids, teenagers, young adults will just do that. For me, that was music. I found my tribe in my high school band, right? So like, that's where I became who I am. I'm a professional musician because of it, So, and yeah, I practiced. Absolutely. I practiced because I want to get better, because, but also because when you practice more and you're one of the good musicians, people pay attention to you, and you're,
That's a great analogy. Yeah,
right. So
like if you're the best, the most dedicated in whatever niche social group you're a part of, like you're going to get recognized.
Absolutely, yeah. You started a student org, right?
Yeah, Informed Citizens. I never found my social group. No. So I tried to form one, hoping that people would come, because I was looking. That's a podcast, right? Yeah, I was so desperate I made a club. So like, can you just make clubs? So like, yeah, like as long as you like get a space and get like a teacher to back it. So I made an Informed Citizens Club to talk about like politics, current events, historical documents, philosophy. 2 people ever showed up. Sometimes it was just me. So
yeah, turns out the hard topics are really hard for people.
Yeah.
But that's perfect. Yeah. Do you find, I want to try to word this, like, do you find in your comment section mostly, is it 50-50 of, yeah, man, keep fighting the good fight, or you're going to hell, you're going to hell, you're going to hell? Is it, what's the dispersion of
it's mostly like atheists who comment on my videos, like 70-80%. Okay. But even some of those can be kind of toxic in a different way.
Really? Toxic in which way?
So like probably the most common comment I get is, because I talk about the Bible, what it actually says. I put it in historical context. Sometimes I'll talk about the Greek, what it actually should say, things like that. And inevitably I'll get atheists in my comments like, oh, so it's just all bullshit. Like, yeah, but there's more to it than that. There's so much more to it than that. Like, I don't blame anybody for not being interested in the topics that I'm interested in, right? Like, you don't have to be obsessed with the Bible and ancient church history like I am. But if you're going to be dismissive like that, like you're missing out on a lot of really cool stuff.
Well, it's still a historic piece of literature at the very least.
Yeah.
Like, you can't to discount that as just a lack an understanding of a huge portion of history in the population.
Yeah. Yeah, there's like 90 to 95% of the Bible is pretty much made up. But not only is there that small fraction that is historically accurate, there's also like, why were these stories made up? What influenced these people to make up these stories?
Yeah, even if they're fictions of the time, so it gets you a concept for like where people were at, what the references were, what was going on.
Metaphor.
Exactly. What influenced those decisions? Was it Zoroastrianism? Was it Greek mythology? Was it Mesopotamian mythology, Sumerian? And it's again, like, you don't have to dig into this like I do. I don't blame you. There's probably much better things to spend your time reading about. But this topic is endlessly fascinating. So to just be like, oh, it's all bullshit. It's like that bothers me more than a Christian coming in and telling me I'm going to hell.
Yeah.
For some reason.
Right. No, that makes perfect sense, because like a Christian telling you you're going to hell is pretty blatantly Christian, right? That's Christian. Yeah.
But it's like, are you going to discount all the fictions, right? Like, oh, the Odyssey's all bullshit, so screw that book. Like,
you're not going to read it now just because you know it's not true. Like,
Moby Dick, no, thank you.
Right.
Don't get me started on Harry Potter.
Yeah. Although, okay, I was going to save this for later, but since we kind of brought up I had a way I wanted it to go, and then you showed up. So, on the note of like the translations, I had known, because I did comparative religious studies on my own, because I didn't trust academic institutions. So at some point I knew the like three love like translation thing, and how like in English you don't get across the thing. So here's the thing. I comically, so like it's a much deeper topic, there's lots of things to it, but I kind of like make my comedic stand against the modern church by blaming Peter, because fuck Peter. And the translation, the correct translation of the three love thing shows the trouble with him in the Bible, like as it stands. Like, you read it word for word, you know, there's John the Beloved, and then he's got these esoteric things and like a deeper philosophy. And then there's Peter, who was like, I mean, you're my bro, but like, God, I don't know about that.
Yeah.
But then,
let's really quick recap what the three love thing is.
Yes. Okay. Fine.
I'll sure. And this is talking about in the Gospels when Jesus asks Peter, "Do you love me?" And Peter says, "Lord, you know I love you." And so Jesus says, "Then go and feed my sheep." And he repeats that 3 times. What you lose in translation is, in Greek, there are 3 different words for love. There's agape, phileo, and eros. Agape is an unconditional love, phileo is a brotherly love, and eros is a sexual love. So what's happening in that passage is Jesus is saying, do you agape me? Do you love me unconditionally, Peter? And Peter says, I phileo you. I love you like a brother. Not really unconditionally, but I love you like a brother. And so Jesus is like, so you only love me like a brother. You don't love me unconditionally? And Peter's like, yeah, I love you like a brother. That's one of those things that is massively lost in translation that you're not going to catch unless you study the Greek.
It should make you think twice that as soon as dude's dead, Peter's the one like, oh, but I'm the guy. Like, this is my thing now.
Yeah. Exactly.
Gotcha.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, because it's like, here's the keys to, you give them the keys, right? It's been a long time. I kind of blocked a lot of that.
There's examples like that in so many different languages. Like, another like parallel I like to bring up is Alaskan Inuits or Alaskan Eskimos. They have 10 different words for snow. Like in English, we attach an adjective to it. Like, it's a slushy snow, it's a powdery snow, it's a dry snow, things like that. And Alaskan Native language, they have a different word for each type of snow. So, like, if you translate something in English from their language, you're not going to you're going to be very confused. You're going to be like, wait, they said there's snow over here, but it's more like slush. But they said there's snow over here, but it's more like powder. But to them, it makes perfect sense because they're using the language that they're,
Yeah, that's one of the troubles just with it, as like when people try to use it to defend their beliefs and faith, it's just not a good defense.
Right.
Because there's so many troubles with translation and iterations and like most of them know enough to defend their point as it stands, but it typically falls apart when somebody comes and shows the greater part of it, which is where you get the thing where somebody studies deep enough, they come out the other end, they're like, okay, that wasn't what I thought it was.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Exactly right.
So I have a small test for you, and because I'm really curious.
Oh, Lord.
Can you list, to the best of your memory, right? You don't have to be perfect about this, but can you list the first original language, and like, can you walk me through all the translations up to modern English?
Yeah, I was wondering that too, actually.
The first original language?
Oh, yeah, like God. What was the first? Like, was it ancient Hebrew?
I am not a
be
linguist.
as simple. You can be as simple as you can. Ancient Hebrew. To, things like that.
To the best of my knowledge, again, I'm not a linguist.
Absolutely.
But the original language started off as like ancient Sumerian, Mesopotamian type, and that kind of evolved into Hebrew. And then there's kind of an offshoot, like, so from Sumerian, there's like an offshoot of like Hebrew and Arabic, or Aramaic. There's some passages in the Bible that originally were Aramaic. So the Hebrew kind of and the Aramaic kind of like smudged together. And then there's like Persian, which they were more Aramaic. That's where like Zoroastrianism made its way into the theology of the Israelites due to the Great Exile during the reign of King Nebuchadnezzar. And then like the Romans took over and introduced Greek. And so Greek started infiltrating. So what's interesting about it, how do I say this? Hebrew is not as complex of a language as Greek is, right? The Old Testament, 99% of the Old Testament is in Hebrew. 99% of the New Testament is in Greek. The New Testament is the Hebrew is very good at conveying like poetry and narrative. Greek is much better at conveying philosophy. That's something that you can't really do in Hebrew. Like, that's why Greek developed in order to articulate these ideas, like Stoicism, Jainism, etc.
Separate branch in Judaism with like the Kabbalistic studies, where it's like, okay, now we need to play with these things philosophically.
Exactly right. So that's why when you get into the New Testament, suddenly you start seeing all these words that you've never seen before in the Old Testament. That's why Paul starts saying has these crazy ideas. Like the Old Testament is fairly straightforward linguistically, from my understanding. But then you get into the Greek New Testament, and there's all these very complex ideas that you have to kind of parse out and figure out what's happening. Paul quotes Greek literature numerous times. He quotes Agamemnon. He quotes Plato's Republic multiple times. The author of Acts does the same. There's influences of Homer's epics, the Odyssey and the Iliad, peppered in there. And so it becomes so much more complex because that's the nature of that language.
Which I bet most Christians don't probably recognize that influence.
Right. Yeah. Then after that, you get more into Latin, of course, with like the Latin Vulgate with Jerome translating the New Testament into Greek and the Old Testament as well. And then, then you get into like Coptic in about the 3rd century. We have a bunch of Coptic manuscripts from the New Testament. And it gets into German, and then eventually gets to English. And so, yeah, when
Right.
when
So
atheists,
just to like
good,
highlight what you just brought us through, I counted at least 8 different steps
yeah,
in there.
at least,
So in a game of telephone with 8 people, something's getting fucked up, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Like apologists hate it when when atheists you say that, stereotypical line, oh, is translated from a translation from a translation from a translation from a translation, blah blah blah. They're like, oh, that's not what happened. It's not like, no, it is. It absolutely is.
Right.
And
It's a
this is what,
translation of a translation of a translation of a translation
and
of a
this is one of the things
translation.
that I've always
And
thought
we have
was,
no idea what it
Right.
originally said.
And just
Go
like
ahead.
Jesus, it got whiter and whiter.
So,
Whiter.
yeah. It's funny how that works.
Yeah.
But this is one of the things that always confused me culturally as somebody who did like comparative religious studies is um like Jewish scholars like approaching Judaism. I don't know if it's like a majority, but there's a huge component of it where it's like, like it, like study it, like study the history, like understand like the time and place. Like they approach their own literature and cultural like story very differently in a much more symbolic and like scholastic take. So that's why it doesn't like destroy their faith to dig into it, because it's been built up in the culture to do that kind of approach to it. Where when then it jumps to Christianity, it seems like it should be there because that's the whole like how you get people like Carl Jung and everybody who's ever come after like citing him.
Mhm.
But you get, it's like when you do these like interpretive elements of the New Testament, there's lots of fun stuff you can like dig into and get into deep psychological elements and philosophies. So when you like pulled apart outside of it being the like divine word of God and this is how you live, when you do the like scholastic take on it, there's a lot of good things in it, which is kind of to the point of like you throw the baby out with the bathwater, just be like, well, forget the whole thing.
Yeah.
But it's weird to me that
So you're saying stories have morals that we should try to remember?
yeah,
Weird.
that's just weird that like that doesn't seem to be a big part of Christianity in the same way that its predecessor and the way that the books are like put together. Judaism has that built in, so you would think like a close relationship, you'd see that, or going through Greek where they had that take on it, or even like the Romans because they had like the mystery studies with Mithra and all that stuff. So like it was built all the way. So at some point it became the only way I can describe it based on my take is it became overly political. Like it separated itself
Oh,
from philosophy.
absolutely. Yeah.
Sounds like you have thoughts on that.
Yeah. Politics is a huge part of the development of the books of the New Testament and the development of the New Testament canon. You look when you look past like the books of the New Testament, you look into like the writings of the early church fathers. It's more obvious the politicizing. So everybody who disagrees with you is a demon. It's possessed by devils, like Justin Martyr will say. Like, so they weaponize that ideology against their opponents.
Absolutely. And for those listening, just watch a YouTube video or read a book on how cults form. I'm not trying to make a joke
Yep.
or anything, but it's very much an us versus them.
Or if you want to do the
separation.
if you want to do the scholarly thing, look how the concept of demons came into it, because they're not in the Bible. It was fan fictions.
Looking at you, John Milton. Yeah.
That became canon.
Yeah, not in the Old Testament anyway. Yeah, in the New Testament you have accounts of, like, of course, Jesus casting out demons and things like that, but in the Old Testament there are no demons.
But
demons came about. Go ahead.
Does it translate that way though?
It translates as daemon, which is a concept again derived from Greek mythology.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't come from the Hebrew scriptures. It's a concept that was borrowed from Greek mythology.
Who had like the Furies and things like that. So that makes sense.
But it's my understanding that it was not like devil spirits, it was earthly spirits. And the idea, because I think it's John talks about like just like spirits are just spirits, but there's earthly spirits who are selfish, and then there's heavenly spirits which are looking after the good of humanity. But it wasn't hellish in the
No,
original.
yeah, you're right. It's not hellish at all. There's no evidence for that in the Bible. But yeah, it was very much, and even Jesus says like Satan is the ruler of this world. Doesn't say he's the ruler of hell. It says he's the ruler of this world. So that was the idea. That was a common myth in Greek mythology that, which is popularized more in Gnosticism, but it's one thing. That these evil forces were here on Earth trying to influence the people there. And God was there to guide you against that. That's why Jesus and Paul are like, sell all your material possessions, don't get married, don't have sex, don't do any of these things. That's where the demons can come and influence you because they know how to tickle your flesh, right? So just deny them that opportunity altogether and just live a godly life. And you won't have to worry about that.
We make this joke a lot that, like, in the missing years, it would make total sense. He wandered just a little too far east, bumped into some Buddhists, and came back and was like, guys, like, you're not going to believe this.
Right.
Wait till you hear what I just learned.
Right.
No.
It is fascinating how when you just dive down to kind of the core, the seed of most of these religions and philosophies, they're all saying roughly the same type of thing. So it just bothers me so much when people are pointing fingers at the other saying, you're wrong. It's like, well, no, you're not. Not really.
And somehow, even though, like, it's the core thing, which just might be our hopeful interpretation, the core thing is always like love for like humanity and all that stuff. But even Buddhists kill each other over translations of Buddhist sayings. So it's weird that we get this message in every one of these religious philosophies, and we continue in every instance to just be like, yeah, he said don't kill, but you're wrong. So
hear me out.
Right. But I get to kill.
Yeah.
For him. Don't worry.
Yeah, for him.
Yeah.
For him.
Or he told me to, because I'm the special one. Yeah. I have this to your knowledge, Deadpool. So to your knowledge, are there any one-to-one translations that have made it this far that are like, yeah, that's what that means? Like, read it in English, like, yes, that is what it means. I know this is putting you on the spot, but if anything does come to mind.
Well, no. The closest that we have, like the New Revised Standard Version of the English Bible, it's like the most up-to-date version, and that's the version that scholars, like biblical scholars, use.
Sure. And I was asking, are there even any just single verses that are like, yes, this one you can actually like take verbatim?
Yeah, there are verses like that, but it's hard to, because like we were talking about earlier, like you can get a parallel that has like the English to Greek side by side. You can go on scriptureforall.org, which is a site I'm on a lot.
That's a
the thing is
that I was
just like the word love, agape, like one word has multiple meanings, and those meanings don't always reconcile as the same. They don't sound like so synonymous in our Western way of thinking. So like we hear like agape, it's like I love you a whole lot, I only love you a little bit, and I just want to fuck you. right that's how a lot of words are in ancient Greek. So it's like what linguists do is they look at those words and they look at the context that those words are used, they look at other literature where those words are used, and they try to look at the context of those and say what's most likely this word means is this. But even then, maybe. Yeah.
That's what you even get with like in the book of John, things like, the word. It's like that could translate pretty directly, but the trouble is you still have to unpack it. It's like even if it's word for word, it's not telling you much without playing with the ideas.
Right.
Yeah, the word, the logos. It was an idea that stemmed from Stoicism. The logos is talked about all over the place in Greek literature, even before Christ. Philo, for example, talks about the logos. And he says like he mentions like the angels that guarded the entrance to paradise that Adam and Eve were kicked out of. He called that angel the Logos. And in his explanation, like God himself called that angel the Logos. So it's like God is calling this angel another god, and Justin Martyr says something this similar, which he's writing about 100 years after Jesus. He says something very similar. So yeah, you have this word, the Logos, that is just an insanely like broad word that can mean so many different things. And then today, apologists will be like, no, Logos means God. That's it. That's all it means. Doesn't mean anything else. It means God, period. Shut your mouth. It's
Or
like,
it means
no.
it means
No,
word.
it doesn't.
By word, it means Bible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's an enormous school of philosophical thought in the ancient world. The Logos is.
Absolutely.
So like you can't.
And I'd just like to point out that you find that gem of literature with John the Beloved. But he's not the one who started the big political church. Peter.
Right.
Just saying, John the Beloved. He's
Mhm.
got some good stuff in there.
John the Baptist, as he's known a lot of the times.
No, that's separate John.
That's separate
Separate
John.
John.
Separate
Yes.
Johns.
Yeah.
I don't.
You were a Catholic.
Oh, okay. Yeah, a lot of people are Catholic.
There's like 9 different Johns in the New Testament.
It's
Right.
true. John the Baptist, also a badass.
You
That's
were
why.
Catholic. Name a Catholic that actually knows what they're talking about.
Wow, that's fair. got me there. I'm still searching.
Yeah, right. So that's actually what kind of turned me off from, I was in I'm even forgetting, confirmation class, right? I am a confirmed Catholic because I went that far to appease my parents.
As you do.
So as you do, as we discussed, minute 5 of this video. But the fact I got really turned off when I learned that the Bible isn't the whole information, right? Because you're made to think, you're kind of propagandized to think that this book has everything that you need to know, and then you learn out that 1,000 years after the fact is when it actually they cut and pasted all this stuff together to say this one and everything else please ignore.
I met somebody who thought the Bible was one book. I was like, no, it's a collection of books. Like, no, it's not. It's like, at the very least, it's an Old and New Testament. He's like, no, it's one Testament. I was like,
Jesus.
I was like, have you ever looked at your Bible? He's like, I've read it a bunch. I was like, open to the very first page of the Bible. He's like, I'll show you. It just says Testament. And sure enough, he was wrong. But
yep.
Yeah,
Faith, Michael, faith.
That means something different, which
Yeah.
I don't know if we're going to get to the Stephen Meyer rant, but oh, man.
We'll get there. You'll make time for it, I'm
We'll
sure.
get there. Give me 1 sec. I'm going to get a drink real quick.
Absolutely, yeah.
I saw you drinking a beer on your show, so we grabbed some.
Absolutely. That and we just drink together.
That's true. Philosophy. Better with booze.
I mean,
unless you're Buddhist. But
they do so many. Have you ever done a breathing exercise like that intense?
Okay, but Taoism is better because booze is included in the way.
Sure is. It helps you ease into the flow of life a little bit.
I like my Buddhism like I like my gardens. Zen.
Full of rocks.
What?
Not the Zen garden. That's
Yeah, but how does that relate to Buddhism?
It rocks. Bad joke.
Is there there's got to be a Buddhist band, Buddhist rock band.
A Buddhist rock band.
It has to exist.
I mean, yeah, Buddhism has been around for
the
roughly-
Beatles.
roughly 3,000. I mean, there's parts. There's definitely parts. Yeah, so I got really turned off by the fact that once I found out the Bible isn't the whole Bible, essentially.
Yeah.
The book that people say to live your life by has been edited by people after the fact. And that immediately, like, I'm not even a conspiracy theorist, and that immediately just made me go, well, now I can't. It has some good points, sure, and I still think it does.
And my thing has always been, like, you can't have the Jewish text and then just get rid of all the Judaism. Like, that's always, like, if you want to have just the New Testament, whole different story. There's still, all the errors are still to talk about, but you can't have a book where literally it's like, okay, read this book. That's great. Now we have these 3 commentaries and this whole course on the philosophical understandings of it, and then just throw all that out with the you can't do that. It's like
Yep.
the
Very
the
good.
Old Testament has that built in, so it just made
Yeah, and it confuses people, and that's kind of on purpose, right? Because it confuses people because politics is a thing, and you can control people when they're confused. Because when you have the answers, they're gonna go with what you say. So that once I learned that, and they didn't even hide that fact. That was kind of the funny thing in my class. Like my teacher didn't even hide the fact that it was chosen by a group of dudes who needed to learn how to manage their people. And it just bothers me so much. What's your favorite book that isn't in the Bible?
My favorite book that isn't in the Bible?
Yeah. What's your favorite biblical content that isn't biblical?
Ooh, that's a good question.
Right? Because there's some good stuff. Like I think there's some genuinely good stuff.
I really like. There's a Gnostic gospel or Gnostic book called the what's it? Secret Letter of Adam, or the Revelation of Adam.
See, that just sounds badass. Right?
Like, maybe it's the secret. Maybe it's the Secret Gospel of John. Shit, I can't think of it now. Anyway,
okay.
So it tells the story. It's about Sophia. Sophia is the goddess of wisdom, mentioned in the Old Testament multiple times, like in Proverbs chapter 8, for example. Wisdom was supposed to be this personified, like, separate god that was kind of a part of God, but separate at the same time. Anyway, so this gospel, like, expounds upon that. And so Sophia, like, wanted to have a child, but her husband didn't want her to have a child. So she reproduced asexually, right? And she had this child, Yahweh. And then she put Yahweh in charge of the cosmos. So Yahweh grows up thinking he's the only God. He's in charge of everything. He's ruling everything. And then later in his life, he learns, oh, I'm not the only God. I'm a child of a higher God.
So there's an actual answer to where did God come from then?
Okay.
Yes.
So we're gonna get into the Stephen Meyer thing, because this exactly leads to that.
And the floor is yours.
Okay, because
Go for it.
So Stephen Meyer was on the Joe Rogan podcast. I was all excited when I read the description because I forgot who he was.
A brief description of who he is.
I think you could probably give a better description because I think you've made content about him previously, right?
Joe Rogan or
Stephen
Meyer?
Myers. Stephen Meyer.
I don't know if I've talked about Stephen Meyer very much.
I thought you did one video at some point.
I might have, but I don't remember. I'm not. I can say that, like, Stephen Meyer is a he's like an authority in, like, the philosophy of science, and he's this hardcore intelligent design advocate.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so his whole thing is this is why I, and maybe listen to Joe Rogan. Joe Rogan brought him on to be like, okay, you say that, but you're a Christian, right? And so he kept pressing him on that because he did not want to talk about it. Because he presents this front of, I'm trying to approach intelligent design through its philosophical and scientific, like, evidences, and we have all this evidence between those two. Okay, sure, whatever. I actually fall into more of that camp philosophically, and he makes two propositions. I've thought these through a bunch of times. The biggest one for me is he tells his, like, genesis of getting into philosophy, that he had an existential crisis, and he says it multiple times. He's like, those answers, like, talk about what's necessary, but not what's satisfactory. I was like, that's a great point. But then he looks at the intelligent design, which I think you can make a philosophical case for. But he's like, he looks at the same evidence and says, well, the only conclusion, which isn't true, because, again, you have Gnostics, you have all these other people that have different interpretations of intelligent design. So saying it's the only one, just not okay. But 2, it's unsatisfactory to have a creator separate from the creation, because it makes you ask the question, where did that creator come from? If you say, well, it just is, that's not a satisfactory answer. So he says my genesis is satisfactory answers.
That's special pleading.
Yeah, and then he does that. Oh, and the second thing is he's like, oh, scientific, but miracles are allowed. No, You can't have that. So you say, well, I believe in a creator separate from the creation, which is an unsatisfactory philosophical answer. Then you say, well, I believe in the sciences, but turns out science is all just wibbly wobbly because God can play God mode in the video game, which breaks the whole scientific system. Those two things contradict his entire persona.
God has console
Yeah.
commands.
Oh,
Yeah.
and it made me so angry.
Sounds like you guys know more about this than I do, which is not
Michael
surprising.
does. Michael does. I didn't listen. I haven't
Yeah.
listened to it.
I was.
Well, y'all are more philosophers, right?
I'm philosopher. He's psychology.
More or less.
Okay,
Yeah, that's
cool.
that's,
That's like
generally it. Yeah. But and it's funny because immediately when you were talking about that, I'm like, well, that has a whole he should see a therapist.
Yeah.
Like
It's so
that
blatant.
has a whole
So
unpacking to do. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
And
We're all
apologists hate it when you ask that question. Then who created a god? But they just expect you to grant that their god has always been there, right? But asking who created this god, where did this god come from, is a perfectly valid question. There's no reason to say otherwise. Like if you're a theist and you're making the arguments for intelligent design, divine hiddenness, the theodicy, et cetera, all these different concepts, your argument for theism is equally as plausible as an argument for deism, as an argument for pantheism, as an argument for polytheism. Like, how are you going to philosophize your way into saying that, sure, the universe was created, but by only one God? How do you know that? How do you know that? How do you know it wasn't created by multiple gods? How do you know it wasn't created by one God that just popped smoke and disappeared because he doesn't want anything to do with his creation?
It doesn't work
metaphysically.
It doesn't work metaphysically. That's my thing. Is you can say God is eternal. Okay, we'll grant you that. But here's the thing: that changes the nature of God, because then there isn't anything separate from God. So this is where you get the Gnostic concept of there's the mini God who morphs the true God's being. It's the emanations, which is Kabbalistic. When you talk about Sophia and stuff, emanations, the concept is there is this pure thing, and everything's just different forms of that. Okay, well then that's a very different God, but that answers the internal question. Yeah,
that's Hinduism, isn't it?
It's Brahmanism.
Yeah,
it is. When you look at all of them, the only reasonable explanation, if there is a God, is it has to just be being, which takes away all the authority elements. But it's the only philosophical thing that works. But my thing is when he's like, no, you can have this. No, you can't. You metaphysically can't have that. You can't have an eternal God, and that God basically has to be redundant, where it's like, it doesn't really matter if it's there. You're just using a word for the substance of everything, which is what makes it philosophical. But they do not want to walk into philosophy.
No, and that's where the psychology comes in.
Yes.
That's where I plant my flag.
There we go.
Because we, humans biologically, down to our most basic brain, our most primal brain, we want safety.
The reptilian brain.
Yeah. All we want as creatures is safety. So having the answer, even if it's not correct, but having an answer you can just kind of assert as true, removes the doubt, and that doubt causes our survival instincts to cool down a bit. Once you remove doubt, we feel like we can survive. That's really what the psychological underpinning of all of this is. So we're just trying to remove the doubt so that we feel okay.
And I guess we'll apologize. Him and I have been avoiding these topics in our personal chats because they're hot topics. But we kind of knew having you on, it falls into the sphere for your content. So it's been bottling up for a while.
Right. So, and so with everything we've been talking about, you don't have to go into great detail, but you're raising kids, and more than most parents about these kinds of topics. Has this come up? And I'm trying to be sensitive to your private life. But
do you tell them about Santa? Because I'm still in that debate with my fiance.
Yeah.
I told my kids very early on that Santa wasn't real, and my oldest, who's 10 now, But when he was in first grade, he went and told everybody in his class that Santa wasn't real.
See, that's the
And I was so proud. I was like, I'm kind of sorry for the damage that did, but I'm also so proud. Like, yeah, tell them the bullshit.
Yeah.
I haven't. They haven't asked a lot of questions about that yet. About God and the afterlife and all that. They've asked questions about like what happens after you die, and I do the best I can in those, but they haven't asked me about like who Jesus is.
Although I think this is a good segue, because a lot of your content is focused on your expertise of like deconstruction. So I'm going to hit you with a classic philosophical thing, because I haven't met a lot of atheists I've gotten an opportunity to ask this question to, because a lot of the louder ones tend to just do that hoorah throw everything out, and just they're reactionary. They haven't processed through. So morality, right? Because that's one of the big things you hear from religious people. Is as an atheist, how do you develop a sense of morality? So I would like to hear your answer on that.
Oh boy. It's a topic I don't delve in a whole lot. Because I'm not.
You can pass.
No, you're good. I'll do the best I can, but just know this is not my area of expertise.
All right.
What I generally respond with is, I don't know where my morality comes from, but you don't get to tell me that my morality comes from your God. That's generally like you're making a claim as to where my morality comes from. You can't make that claim.
Right.
So absolutely fuck off.
Yeah.
All I can say is I have empathy. I know how to treat other people the way I want to be treated. Even if I don't like that person, I'll still treat them well. Yep.
Like and love are two different words.
Exactly. Yeah.
Even in English, we know
that. Like, I don't need a big brother hovering over me. I'm saying, like, you better make the right decision here. I'm not worried about that.
Was George Carlin a large part of your deconstruction?
No, not really.
Okay.
Oh, you mean the big brother comment? That's more a Hitchens thing.
It is. You're right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's more like my moral decisions just, they don't come out of a worry that, again, Big Brother is looking over me like, you better make the right decision here, or you're gonna get it. It's just like, that guy is struggling. Maybe I could help him in some way. That's I'm sorry you're going through that. That sucks. I will give you a big hug. I will let you cry on my shoulder. That's where my morality comes from, is just something in here that I'm like, that sucks.
Right. And you're asking.
Super glad I'm not going through that, but I will help you go through that.
For real. And that's
as best I can.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And I don't know if you realize this, but you just asked the age-old psychology debate of nature versus nurture.
Oh boy.
You just asked that question.
Sure. I mean,
so yeah, because are you just that way? Or even if in your upbringing were you taught to be this
that's
way,
where you get a lot of the Jungian interpretation, is that, like, separate from like the divinity of Christianity, the philosophical elements of it change the way that we see humanity. Like, that's where you get a lot more of the progressive ideals, was because of the progressivism of the like inherent philosophies of the Christian movement. So, right, like if you were raised in ancient Babylonia, would you have the same empathy? It's, I guess, that kind of question. That's not the question I was asking, but
you're a product of your upbringing. Like, if I was born 2,000 years ago, I'd have a completely different moral compass than I have now.
Right.
So, but society has made progress since then. It used to be okay to own women as sex slaves.
Right.
That's not okay anymore. 2,000 years ago, I might have thought that was okay. I might have thought that was normal, because in that culture, that was kind of normal. But today, no, fuck that. That's dumb. So I don't know.
So that was a setup to like a bigger question, and this kind of relates to, in the sphere that you're in, I guess, as especially with your position within the atheist community, a more active participant, there's this like need to like bridge gaps and like find communications, because the philosophical thing that makes that interesting, we'll say, is that becomes hard because you have to negotiate it across people, right? So you say, well, this is how I feel about morality, but somebody else can say the same thing, and then you have to like work between those separate moralities. So
Yeah.
how do you see like that playing out in like a, so there's a community of people who are all drawing lines on like what is okay and what is not okay in totally different spaces.
What I can say is, personally, I swing wildly back and forth between let's build bridges, let's try and find a common, something we can discuss and connect on, and then the other side of me is like, fuck you, fuck your god, fuck your couch, you're dumb as shit, I hate you. Like, I swing wildly back and forth because I don't know, like,
Because you're
I have
human. Because you're human.
yeah,
That's
right. I have apologists that are friends. I can talk to them on the phone for hours about whatever. But there are other apologists that I'm going to tell you you're fucking dumb as shit. I don't even want to talk to you. What I think overall the trend is, going back, we were talking about Madeline O'Hare earlier. There was a firebrand atheism that existed in the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s. That is sort of soft. That was, I think, was necessary at the time because it got a lot of attention very quick.
Yeah.
But that's sort of softened over time, and now people are trying harder to do the build bridges approach.
Because at some point we have to, right?
Yeah, exactly. At some point, you have to realize we're all humans. We're all on the same planet. We have no idea what the fuck we're doing. None of us do.
Right. Yep.
So you have to talk about it.
That's the big secret.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's talk about it. I'm all for talking about it.
Right. And it's
But
funny because
where I draw the line is. Yeah, go ahead.
No. Where do you draw the line?
Yeah, where do you draw the line?
Yeah.
Where I draw the line is telling me that you're right and I'm wrong, and I have to adhere to your religious standards.
So you would like a separation of church and state? Is that what
absolutely. just a little bit, maybe a little bit. Yeah.
What a novel idea.
If only somebody wrote that down.
Right.
Yeah, write that down.
Yeah. We can have these philosophical religious discussions. We can talk about history and epistemology and all that good stuff. But as soon as you say, I don't think abortion is right because my religion says so, you can't have abortion. I don't think being gay is right. I think that makes God angry. So you shouldn't be allowed to be gay. Then I'm going to be like, okay, shut your whore mouth.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and
I'm done talking to you. We're not friends anymore.
They will cite deists for their theism. And there's a very, very important difference between... Jefferson was like, yeah, there's some good parts of the Bible, and I'm going to cut those pages out and glue them together.
With a scalpel. He literally cut out the miracles that Jesus performed. He left in like the moral lessons, but he cut out all the miracles.
Right. And then irrelevant.
And you had all the Freemasons who were known historically for allowing homosexuals within their ranks, which is one of the reasons. Okay, so fun fact for just general listeners: one of the reasons Freemasonry is considered satanic is because they were known for housing eccentrics, and the Catholic Church hated that. Also, the Bavarian Illuminati. There are physical pamphlets that have existed talking about how both Freemasons and the Bavarian Illuminati were devil-worshipping Satanists because the church was against the atheism or the progressivism or the like trying to find a philosophical route between the various religions. So the like conspiracy theories around, oh, Freemasons are evil and Illuminati's evil, like that's just basic church propaganda. And here's the thing, we know that. Like that's a fact. We have records of them saying those things in official church documents. So but when people quote deism, they're quoting heretics. Like I guess that does keep it on brand. They're quoting heretics.
Most of the founding fathers were deists.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, it's the whole thing. And you had mentioned before about the atheist cell that kind of caused a big stir and then have calmed down to more diplomatic necessities.
Yeah.
Christianity did the same thing. There was the hardcore, I'm converting you now or your whole village dies.
Yeah.
And that kind of happened for a while. And then it was, all right, we're going to send like 2 priests. We're going to go on missions. We're just going to befriend these people and convert them that way, rather than like, no, you don't get guns this time. Like, talk to them instead. Like, it's,
Yeah.
the famous quote, I forget who said it, but the famous quote is, history may not repeat itself, but it sure does rhyme. That's a big one. That might be Mark Twain. Sounds like something Mark Twain.
It sounds like something Mark Twain would say. I think you're right. I think you're right about that. Yeah.
Wow. But yeah, so with history being a topic right now, are you a history buff in general, or do you kind of stay in your lane as far as learning history of Christianity?
I kind of stay in my lane in this area.
Okay.
Yeah, more biblically focused, early church focused. Past like the 4th century, I don't know very much. But prior to that, I know quite a bit.
Okay. So you're even niche within the niche, right? So you kind of stay to a period. Interesting. Why is that, if you don't mind me asking?
I don't know. I think it's just one rabbit hole leads to another. I'm interested in finding out where all of this came from. When you look at like certain doctrines that the church holds to, like the doctrine of original sin, the Trinity, things like that, you can trace all how this idea evolved over time, what influenced those ideas, and how it ultimately was adopted as orthodoxy. That's endlessly fascinating to me. So yeah, I like to see how these ideas came about.
Okay. So with
and you go ahead.
Well, with you can finish your thought if you'd like, but my question is, with what you just said, are you a fan of things that, Christian influence is just pervasive in our society and in our storytelling, at least in the West.
Mm-hmm.
Are you a fan of things like, the Chronicles of Narnia or even Constantine and, like, have you read Milton? All that kind of stuff. Like,
a little bit.
Yeah. And is it because of your knowledge base? Like, does that enhance it, or is it just cool? Like.
I don't know if it enhances it. It's more like I watch like those movies. I read like virtually no fiction.
Okay.
Like,
yeah.
Feel that.
I haven't read a fiction book in probably 2 or 3 years. But when I watch these movies, I just like pick it apart. Like, nope, that didn't happen. Like the Da Vinci Code. Like, nope, wrong. So it kind of ruins it, I guess, a little bit.
Oh, I love that. As a musician, anytime I see musicians on screen, I'm like, that's not how that works. That's not.
Oh, I'm sure. I'm sure.
Everyone's got their thing like that. Yeah. I also know a bit of martial arts, and any fighter who sees a TV, an on-screen fight, they're going, that's a bunch of bullshit.
Yeah, same. I've quite an extensive background in martial arts as well.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Even the ones that are like, you can tell when they've done their homework, the choreographer.
That's why people love the John Wick movies.
Yeah.
They're good. I'm not about the hype.
Yeah. They're very well done.
Yeah.
I think.
Oh, that's fair. Because kind of the main like things that were influenced by Christianity that people love. Good Omens comes about, that TV show with David Tennant.
That's Neil.
I haven't seen that one yet.
Yeah. It's based on a book by Terry Pratchett and.
Oh, it's Terry Pratchett? I thought it was one of the Neil books.
And Neil Gaiman. They co-wrote it.
Oh, that would make sense.
Yeah, even American Gods in the appendices, in the deleted scenes of the book, the dude does meet Jesus. Like, yeah, and it's.
I got 3 episodes into that show, and then it was removed from Amazon Prime.
Oh,
I was so mad because I was super into it.
Sure.
My understanding, I read the book. I read the book and haven't seen the show. My understanding, the show is better than the book. The book is great as a piece of literature, but
good prose. Yeah.
Yeah, but what do you expect based on like the theme? they do in the show, where the book is not that.
That's fair. That's fair. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, the Chronicles of Narnia is all, it's very, very Christian. Lord of the Rings, I mean, Tolkien was a devout Catholic, so there's a lot of
That
undertones.
surprises me every time I hear it. Sure.
Yeah. There's always going to be those undertones. Even the Matrix. Like
really, that's a new one to me. Okay.
Think about it. Even though the Matrix is owned by I forget their names, but the two trans sisters, I think, right? Sure. If you look at the license plates in the Matrix, they're all Bible verses. So the whole idea is like you escape the Matrix, like you escape the world, you accept salvation, and you live this life of like humble, persecuted. As before, you had everything you could ever want. So that's kind of where the Christian undertones come from.
I did not know that. That's amazing. That movie, to this day, just new stuff every time.
Oh yeah, it's one of those movies you can watch over and over again. You catch something new every time.
Yeah, it's great.
I want to watch it now. Actually,
yeah, I haven't watched it in a while.
I think about it. Yeah.
Although, so on the note of TV shows, and now for something completely different. So you were one of the Hammers, right?
Oh yeah.
Oh, do you have a Mjolnir?
Yeah.
Mjolnir. Yeah.
So
also have a tattoo.
Just in case you forget the necklace. That's good.
So
yeah.
Atheist, but you got a Mjolnir. So what's the story there?
I get this question a lot. So when I was a Christian, I wore a cross around my neck, because as you do, for like 15 years. And when I deconstructed, and I was like, I guess I don't believe in this anymore. So I took it off, but I felt naked, not having something around my neck. So I wanted to replace it with something that was more meaningful to me as a person. My heritage comes from Iceland. My last name Brock, or my last name is Brock, comes from Brook, which is Norwegian. So I'm literally have a Viking heritage. Not to sound cool or anything. No. Feel free to think I'm cool. I'm not going to stop you.
I'll drink that. Skull to that, my friend.
Yeah. Skull. Yeah.
Although, okay.
So I was like, yeah, I want to. I was like, let's wear something that's more representative of me. So I put on the Mjolnir. I haven't worn it ever since.
Yeah. So is it a more of just a cool historical, ethnic type thing rather than like a philosophical, or some people are even religious toward that,
or being like into the mythology, right? Because there's a lot to unpack there.
Oh yeah, a lot to unpack there. No, it was more like a way of, how do I say this without sounding lame as shit?
Sound lame as shit.
It was more a way of me reclaiming my own identity.
That makes sense,
right?
Yeah.
So like, I'm not wearing this cross of Jesus anymore. Like this is who I am.
Yeah, it's a very sociological.
So it was kind of like a weird like healing, or a part of the healing process, I guess.
And I think a lot of people who either find paganism itself, or just the I'm the same as you, Deadpool, where I don't have the hammer on right now, but I do have one. I studied that shit a lot. It's super fun.
But he reads runes, so
I do know the runes, yes. Which there's a whole historical. They're basically tarot, but
they're also Phoenician, which is hilarious.
Yeah, that's a whole nother thing. But it is because you do that, and it's okay. Well, who am I? Who am I without Christianity? Well, who were people like me before they were Christians? And you kind of just take that one step historically backwards and go, okay, well, let's see what they had to think about the world. You just kind of exist in that space for a while. It doesn't have to be permanent, because if you go back far enough, I don't know, you start.
I mean,
yeah, absolutely.
You start hugging trees,
But if you want to just be platonic, or you have a Celtic heritage, you can still wear the cross and not have it associated, because it turns out it's older than that. And the actual cross is probably a tau, a T, uppercase, not a lowercase t.
I have seen those, yeah.
Because that's more likely what it was. In fact, in the early depictions, that's how it was.
Yeah. Yeah. Artists take a lot of liberty in in showcasing what they think.
I also didn't want to like since I became an atheist, I didn't want to wear like the atheist logo around my neck. I didn't want to like make atheism my whole identity.
Yeah.
You know, I didn't want to be that guy.
Actually, that was a question I had for you. I
You
mean,
know?
because I feel like that happens a lot where,
Yeah.
we're on the question of identity, especially identity after deconstruction. A lot of people just embrace atheism as a new religion of sorts.
Mhm.
They're just as bad, just now they're an atheist.
Some of them, yeah. Now, I think it's important to realize that a lot of people like they make atheism a core part of their identity.
Mhm.
As if you're a psychologist, you'll probably appreciate this. That's also like their own form of like healing,
Right?
You know, you're adopting a new identity that's better suited to you. So not shitting on those people at all. If that's what helps you heal, if that's what helps you recover, that's what helps you find yourself, go for it. Get the atheist tattoo. Do all of it. Go for it.
Well, and it's a pendulum swing, right? Like, so you're stuck over here, so it takes a large amount of force, and that force just carries you sometimes, like, to be a little bit more hyper vigilant in the new belief system to establish it in the first place.
It's almost like a hyper correction sometimes.
It is. There's a whiplash effect all the time with these kinds of things. It really is.
Yeah.
And I guess the issue for those listening is to avoid, if you do that, don't try to convert people like a Christian would.
Yeah.
Because that'll put a sour taste in anyone's mouth, no matter what religion or non-religion it is, philosophy, if you will.
Yeah. And luckily I'm happy to say I don't see much of that from the atheist community. I don't see a lot of people trying to convert.
That's because you're in it, though. Because the media face is always going to be the loudest voices. So the average person who's outside of the more like full community gets a lot of that, like, you're wrong and hoorah.
Yeah.
Now, to be
fair,
there's
absolutely that.
To be fair, it's Dawkins and the two that were like really famous for a while there. I feel bad because I watched a bunch of their stuff.
Dawkins and Krauss.
There's a few.
Bill Maher.
They did the two, like, the tours together. It was the two of them, Glasses and like Short Smoker.
I'm not sure.
Dawkins and
I want to say like
Harris. Tim Harris.
No, it was like Hitch or so. Oh, that's gonna bother me, and I want to look it up now. Hitcherson or something. Either way,
we'll think of it.
But my point was going to be like,
isn't Hitchens?
Hitchens, yeah. Like, I don't know why. I was saying like
Dawkins and Chris Hitchens, yeah.
Yeah, I kept saying Hitchison in my mind. I was like, that's not right. Hitchison. But so like people like try to use them as an example of the extreme, and I would say they're definitely not, like, when you really weigh things out. But the amount of times they just dunk on people is phenomenal.
Yeah,
because people are like, oh, like, these guys are the extreme atheists, so they're extreme, we're going to push them to their extremes. But they were actually very well rounded in general with the way they approached like things philosophically, so they allowed enough space for people to like step in with like an intensity that they just didn't match, other than with like the intellectual cut down they would do. So that stuff's great.
Yeah.
Do you end up in a lot of debates? Have you done like formal debates with these kinds of things yet?
Yeah, I've done some formal debates. I haven't done any for quite a while. Just because it's a whole different. I don't think I'm very good at it.
Yeah, it's a different type of thing.
Debating is its own skill set, that's for sure.
It's a whole it's a whole different skill. Like, I can make a like killer presentation, and I've won like several of the debates that I've quote unquote won. But like when it comes to like the open dialogue, like my opponent will like ask me questions, and I'll like sit there and think about them, and then they'll just keep asking me more questions. I'm like, hold on. And so I won't ever respond. So it makes it look like I'm losing.
Mm-hmm.
The reality is like, no, hold on. I'm trying to think of a way to respond. not ready yet. Gonna give me time. So yeah, debate is a whole different skill set.
Yeah.
Than yeah.
No, it is.
I want to do
verbal
more in the
chess.
future.
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's
I want
a
to do
good
more in the
skill to
future,
have.
but
it's a perfect skill
something
to have.
I need to get better at.
More people need to actually debate. That's the thing, because most people.
I think more people need to discuss.
Well, yeah, even that, because it's
like
just not
debate is all the hot
anymore.
topic because everyone's debating and taking out like the little clips from who thinks won this one and who think wins that one, but they're not coming to conclusions.
That's the thing about debates is it's just like a clip, like bait.
Mm-hmm. Well,
because it's just an opportunity to create clips like so and so destroyed so and so in this argument, and you see it all the time on my YouTube feed. Like, yeah, and it's like no, that didn't actually happen. Watch the whole debate. I don't know. It's just a big mess.
And before there was
you have a problem with people cherry picking from a larger
a larger
context. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah.
Look, it's fine if you do it just here.
Right.
Don't worry about the other stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. I kind of like that format of debate where it's like, you give like a 10-minute presentation and the other person gives a 10-minute presentation, and then it's open discussion after that.
Well, and especially
that I can get behind that.
Well, and when it's two people that understand the art of debating, because then like they understand like, you maybe like you're emotional, so you ask a couple questions, but they're like, well, I'm going to address it, whatever. They're like, oh, you're right, I'm wrong. I shouldn't have asked you so many questions. I got heated. Could you please answer like this one? Like when you have two debating people that understand the art of debate, it's brilliant. But
most people, it's just waves waves of stuff.
Yeah, that's another thing. Like they can accuse you of like being over emotional. Like, just the other day, I was watching a Matt Dillahunty debate a Muslim, and Matt Dillahunty was doing the Matt Dillahunty thing, where he was like, "Are you serious right now?" He was getting like loud. And so the Muslim guy he was debating, he was like, "Oh, you're getting emotional. Yeah, clearly you're not." And Matt was like, "Really? I just lost because I raised my voice a little bit? Really?" And it's like, no, you can be passionate about your position. That doesn't mean your argument is invalid. Mm-hmm. So that it's just there's a whole toxicity to the realm of debate. It's like, yeah, you can't express emotion. Richard Carrier does this a lot too, by the way. He was like, "Oh, you're clearly raising your voice, so you're not ready to have this conversation."
And then, and then it does something that's called switch tracking in conversations, where one person it does something called switch tracking, where
switch tracking.
Yeah, in it's a psychological term in conversation where, if a new point is raised, someone carries on with the point they just raised, but the other person's carrying on with the point before that. So now they think they're talking about the same thing, but now they're arguing two different things without realizing it. So it's just, it creates friction and frustration. And that's where the art of debate needs to come in, is that you need to understand that that's happening and bring it to alignment. But most people are not that aware, or they don't want to.
Because a good debate is a discussion with two teams.
Right.
Like a regular discussion is one team trying to like move towards understanding. A debate is a discussion, just you separate into two teams to give it more of like a contrast. But it should feel more like a discussion, just with that like polarized structure. But for some reason, people think it's about winning, and like you're supposed to score, sure, right. But it's almost
debates are meant to inform.
Yeah, like it's meant to be like entertainment education, not pure entertainment, and not.
I once, just as an experiment, watched one of the more famous presidential debates between JFK and Nixon. And you would think, wow, that's got to be like really, intense and rah, rah, rah. They were both civil and cordial and waited their turn and made good points and complimented the points of the other. Like, you wouldn't think that would be the case with the debates.
And then you watch Trump debate Hillary.
Right.
Like, what happened?
That's not a debate. That's the thing. It's just
so different.
That's just the wrong word to use at this point.
But that's because people are tired of the politicians all being on the same team of politicians. So it's like that's understandable.
Yeah.
Because like his dunk on her with the tax stuff, hilarious.
Mm-hmm.
She's like, yeah, all this rich stuff. He's like, you mean the stuff that I use from your party? Like, I'm that guy. Like, and I did it associated with your party. Like,
she's like, that makes me smart.
Yeah.
Right.
But it's also he was really close to the Clintons. He was a Democrat.
He was a Democrat.
He's like, you guys gave me the ability to do that. Like, so you can't use that against me. Oh, just some good bits. So that's the thing, it's bits. That's why I'm so thankful. Like, ironically, like we had radio, moved to TV, like went to like short stuff like TikTok, and we're like coming back to like almost like the new form of radio where people are like, we need space to like breathe through things. So you're getting like the long form podcast. Like my favorite form of entertainment right now is tabletop RPG actual play. Like it's the thing I look forward to every week. It is my episodic thing that I'm just into. Dying 5, I'm gonna plug because it's Wednesday, really so the new episode came out.
They're really good. Yeah.
But like that's my like go-to thing. So like we had this weird arc back to like long form audio with like visual as like optional, because most of the stuff you can do. I just found your podcast today, so I'm so excited because I knew you had stuff on YouTube, but I didn't realize you had it on Spotify. So you are both.
All my stuff on Spotify is like a year and a half old. I haven't updated it at all.
So how long have you
probably something I need to do.
How long have you been doing the YouTube stuff?
YouTube's about 3 years ish.
And how long have you been doing the like guest stuff? Because I know your TikToks, you had like a lot of back-to-back guest content.
Yeah, on YouTube, I think I started about 3 years ago. And I started inviting other TikTokers onto chat. And then it moved into scholars. Like I got a big enough following that I could email them and be like, hey, I have this many followers on YouTube or on TikTok. Would you want to come on my show for an interview? And then they would enjoy themselves and they'd come back, and that they connect me with other scholars. So yeah, it's something I do for fun. And it's really cool to be able to interview these people that are just like I've interviewed Bart Ehrman like 4 or 5 times, and it's just bananas to me that I can talk to. Like, he'll come onto my podcast. Like Dr. James Tabor is another one. Dr. Kip Davis is a friend of mine. I chat with him in DMs. Pat Lollinger, he called me today and we had like a half an hour long conversation. So yeah, it's absolutely bananas to me.
That's wonderful. So let me ask, are you on, not to make it seem like you're in I don't know what I'm trying to say, but are you on some sort of mission with this? Are you on some sort of mission with this? Or are you doing it to explore your own thoughts and to just kind of...
literally just explore my own thoughts.
Okay.
It's just fun for me. I don't make very much money off of it. I don't get a lot of clout out of it, or maybe I do, but I don't notice. I don't really care.
Right.
But just the fact that I get to have conversations with these like professors with PhDs who are specialists in this field, and I get to pick their brain for an hour or two. That's just fun for me. Love that. That's really the only reason I do it.
Relatable.
So what about your personal content, like where it's you solo? Like, is that the same kind of thing where that's fun, or do you have like more of a sense of I want to get this out there because I know about it and I think it's important?
Yeah, on TikTok it's more the latter. Okay. It's more like I have this information and I want to get out there, because when I first made it big on TikTok, I wasn't trying to. I was just it was during the pandemic. I had to quit my job so I could take care of my kids. So like I downloaded this children's dancing app just to see what all the buzz was about. And then I started making content of my own. It was mostly like political in nature. And then I made this one video that went viral about my deconstruction from religion after leaving Bible college. And I got a shit ton of questions about the Bible and about early church history.
Sure.
And like things I was not expecting. I was like, really? You want to know about this? You want to know about how the Trinity developed? Okay, I can tell you that. Sure. So I would answer all these questions over and over again. And so that's all it is to this day. Is just answering questions and trying to put this information out there.
The way you do it is phenomenal because it's such a like soothing sassiness. Like your edge is there.
Love that.
Like you come into it and like as somebody who's one of the people that's like, oh, like we want more of your content. It's because when your face pops up, I know something's about to get cut down. But you approach it just so calmly. Like, look, here's the information. So it's this like wonderful blend of like, again, not the like
do with it what you will.
The intense firebrand thing. It's really smooth and like cool, like energy wise. But then you really like hone it into a really sharp, like I'm gonna nail the points. I'm gonna like simplify the concept so you get the like break by break, boom, there it's done. So it's wonderful.
I appreciate that feedback, I really do.
Definitely. Yeah.
That's what I try to do. And on TikTok, you only have like 3 minutes, or it used to be 3 minutes. Now it's like 10. But back in the day, it was only 1 minute.
Right.
And then they extended it to 3 minutes. But so still, I got 3 minutes to get my point across. So you got to learn to like trim the fat and just get your point across quick.
No, it's true. And the human attention span is not that big anyways, so you
however
want to get to it.
The data is clear that people are watching the long form TikTok. So just in case anybody's wondering what the actual back end data is,
I haven't looked into it. I don't follow my analytics at all. I probably should.
Because there's different crowds within TikTok. Because like I make it a point for people who talk about TikTok, like the dancing and stuff like that. My TikTok is mostly educational. Like if I want to just scroll and look at funnies, I can't. Like I'm lucky if I get like comedy stuff. So if it's me and my fiance hanging out, we have to be on her TikTok because it's all the funny stuff. Because I made a conscious effort to prove once I found out that there was creators doing like intellectual stuff and art, because all the millennials like whatever swooshed in during the pandemic. I was like, I'm just gonna train the algorithm to show me stuff that if I'm gonna be scrolling, I'm basically getting your content or clips from like debates and people doing like YouTube style presentation. So it's like if I scroll for a while, it's like either I'm gonna learn some stuff or I'm gonna be like, I probably shouldn't be on my phone right now.
Not even one muscle mommy. Come on.
I try to avoid thirst traps for 2 reasons. One, because if I watch them, you get more of them, and I don't want to lose my feed.
That's
and
true.
2, if one pops up while my fiance's next to me, then I have to deal with that. So I have there's one muscle mommy. I don't remember her name, but she was one of like the first ones, and I don't know. It's awesome because
fitness is one of the biggest things in TikTok. So
fitness is a big one.
That's just a part of it. Can I want to kind of yanking us back to topic real quick.
What topic?
I actually meant to ask this much earlier, but we moved on, and you reminded me of it, Dadpool. So in Bible, you call it Bible college. Is seminary school a different thing? Is that I'm just
seminary is a little bit different.
Okay.
I went to a Christian university. Like it was fully accredited. So there's like seminary and Bible college and Christian college.
Okay.
Technically, mine was a Christian college, but it was a university and fully accredited. And
gotcha.
Yeah,
okay. That wasn't my question, but I just wanted to make sure I'm using the right terminology.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah. So in these schools, like what are the classes like? Do you feel like you're being, maybe looking back at it, do you feel like you were more? Is this an indoctrination thing? Is it a like, peek behind the curtain of like, all right, here's what we tell people, but here's what the meaning is? Is it just a lot of independent study? Is it Socratic seminar type stuff? Like what is that schooling like?
There is a bit of like peek behind the curtains element to it, because one of the first things they tell you when you get to Bible college is forget everything you learned about the Bible and church. Forget it all. It's probably wrong.
Right.
That's one of the first things they tell you. And then, you learn a lot of things you don't hear in church. Now what they do, or at least what my school did, every school's different. This is not like universally. What my school did is they'd present you with multiple different options on how to reconcile some of these things. So, for example, Genesis, the creation narrative, they'd be like, if you want to believe New Earth creationism, you can, but there's also Old Earth creationism. There's also the gap theory, which is the theory that there's a large chunk of time that was not recorded in between Genesis and the flood. So they would give you like these different options, right, that you could believe. I first learned about the Epic of Gilgamesh, which is 500 years earlier than Genesis. Mm-hmm. It's almost the exact same story. So I remember my professor being like, "Yeah, this is supposedly dated earlier than Genesis, but there's problems with carbon dating, so you could bring that into question." And I was like, "Wait, what? I could just question the carbon dating? Do you know how to carbon date shit? Because I don't." Right? How am I supposed to question the carbon dating methods? Are you going to show me how to do it?
It'd be fine.
No?
It'd be fine
No,
if they were taking a Bertrand Russell approach, where it's like, technically that's testimony. Because I was reading that book and I was telling you how like all science is
you were. Yeah.
testimony. Because if you look in a microscope and then you talk to somebody, but like, they're not approaching it philosophically, right? So it's like,
so if a lawyer goes to Bible school, here's what's gonna happen.
Yeah. Yeah. Jesus. So, but at the same time, there was an indoctrination aspect in that, like, we had to go to chapel 5 days a week.
Sure.
And between 11 and 12, it was an hour-long chapel with worship and a sermon every day. So there was that, like, you're being force-fed Jesus. And then you would go and like be exposed to the academia.
Sure. Was this was this
kind of weird?
Was this like a Lutheran college, or, if you don't mind me asking?
No, this was a Assemblies of God, or a charismatic Pentecostal.
Okay.
It was actually a sister college of Liberty University.
Okay.
Ooh. Okay, so I rattle off things that get me in trouble semi on purpose because I like being corrected. So I'll do kind of like, instead of asking why, I'll make bold statements to get corrected or to have them broken, I guess. Like, I like building strong, what sounds like a strong thing.
Gotcha. Okay.
To have it be broken. So earlier we were talking kind of like in preparation for this, and like, it's my take, because this is my trouble with like how church is, regardless of the denomination, is they're all Catholic. Just they take out parts of being Catholic, because like there's like the Gnostics and the Cathars, which are totally separate, like churches.
I wouldn't say they're all Catholic. I'd say they're all Orthodox.
Okay,
which is kind of synonymous, but Orthodoxy is an earlier version of Catholicism.
Okay.
Orthodoxy just means right opinion, and that's the opinion that was established after they forced all the other opinions out, like Gnosticism, Marcionism. Everything was pretty much stamped out, and then Orthodoxy became, bam, this is us, and then like Catholicism kind of grew out of that.
Okay, so first it was we're right, you're all wrong, and then one group said, but we're universally right. And
yeah, pretty much.
And even that group split into two, because you have the Eastern Orthodox and Roman Catholic.
It's a whole thing.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
It's one of my weird things.
Hey, give me 1 second.
Absolutely. Yeah, you're fine. No, we're taking the rabbit hole with both hands.
Well, and I apologize, I guess, to some degree, where like after the Stephen Meyer thing, like, I've been heated about a lot of the right-wing content. Like, we try in our own chats to kind of avoid, or even our content. So like in a lot of our own stuff, we try to avoid like current event stuff or some of the more like hot button stuff, because there's plenty of
universal.
Yeah, there's plenty of philosophical stuff to talk about that isn't so heated. But I've had a lot of this bottled up, and unfortunately, it's very relevant to this conversation. So,
well, let's hear it.
Yeah.
Oh, that was like all my rants about. So on the exact topic we were talking about, I like when people are like, "Oh, well, that's the Catholics, we're not that. I'm like, you're the same lineage. Like, that's one of the troubles I have is they're all this Orthodox lineage, and that Orthodox lineage is philosophically flawed, right? Again, back to my point about philosophically flawed. There are Christian, like, lineages that are philosophically sound, and, like, you can debate all kinds of things, but they're also open to debate. But there's a single lineage through that, like, orthodoxy that's to all the various popular denominations. And they all have the same fundamental flaws, and for some reason, they like to try and distinguish themselves from their lineage, but it's like, but you're all the same fundamental thing. And it's like, there is alternative ways to approach, like, being a Christian. Like, because I guess that's my thing. It's like, there's other ways to be a Christian outside of the Orthodoxy tradition and the many denominations.
And the thing is that Orthodoxy wasn't established until like the 4th century at the Great Council of Constantinople. That's when the final version of the Nicene Creed was established, and that's what became law of the land. Before that is when, Gnosticism and everything reigned supreme. All these different people with all these different ideologies or different theologies identified as Christians. Marcion believed in 2 separate gods. He believed in a God of the Old Testament who was evil and wrathful, and he believed the God of the New Testament, which Jesus came to represent, was here to save us from the God of the Old Testament. That was a 2nd century Christian belief, right? And that's just one of like 100,000 others. Not really 100,000, but
a lot. Yeah.
The point is, like, Christian doctrine was all over the place in the first 3 centuries after Jesus died. And then in the 4th century, it became much more solidified and it bottlenecked into what we now know as Orthodoxy. So it's like, go back. If you go back to the the very earliest Christians, I forget what they're called now. It's a group. The very earliest Christian group that we have record of. If you were Christian, you were supposed to move out into the desert and sell all of your belongings, and everybody like pooled all their money together and cared for each other's health, burials, if someone died, food. Like, it was a very socialist.
Right. So go live in a commune.
Right. It was a commune. Exactly. That's like the earliest Christian group, is completely separate from society. You set up your own like financial system where you support each other, you own support group. That was the earliest Christians. Nobody does that now.
No. Most Christians that I know would call that socialism, and you're bad for thinking that.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. That was the thing, is like Christianity originally, like, they harped on taking care of one another. There's stories about, I think it's Justin Martyr, who is like, if you go to the Temple of Osiris, you can pay to sleep in the temple overnight, because Osiris is said to appear to you in dreams. So if you're looking for guidance from the god Osiris, you pay to sleep in the temple overnight. You can pay to have like ceremonial garbs. You can pay to have a special like bed to sleep on. All this like special stuff you can pay for. The earliest Christian groups were like, you don't have to pay for anything. We're all in this together. We're a community. We take care of each other. You don't have to pay to have, special connection with God.
That is the divine revelation, is that you, separate from an organization, can have a relationship with God. And yet, all these organizations.
Yeah.
Oh, that's really it. Yeah, it's obviously over 2,000 years, something is gonna.
2,000 years will leave you such a crank in the neck.
Oh, rest in peace.
Right. Seriously. Yeah. But that really is it. It's funny you mention that. I had no idea of that historical context. I mean, I knew Christianity was about, helping socialism, for lack of a better term, but helping each other in that way. I actually just talked to some of so I'm working with a marching band this summer to prepare for their fall. And in Wisconsin, there's a lot of competitive marching bands. So they have a field show and they compete against other ones, and it's a whole state competition, that kind of thing. The show that my kids are doing this year is a Mary Poppins theme show, and I'm going somewhere with this. And
Sure.
one of the songs is it's "Feed the Birds." It's called "Feed the Birds" from Mary Poppins.
Yeah.
And I don't know if either of you are familiar with that song, really, but it's one of the lesser known ones in the film. But it's about a woman who goes to she stands in front of St. John's in London and sells breadcrumbs for tuppence, 2 pence a bag, right? So, and it's all about how when she does this, all the saints, on St. John's, all the statues and depictions of them, they're all smiling as she does this, is basically the lyrics of it. And it's this big, like, kind of grandiose song for such a simple thing. But it's the song is a metaphor for, you can feed the birds, you can do something nice for tuppence, for 2 pennies, for nothing. For so little, you can do something kind and nice. And that is such a celebrated act, in the eyes of what is good and holy, right? You don't think of that when you think of Mary Poppins, but that is kind of one of the main themes of the movie, of the show, is it's the little acts of kindness. I mean, she comes in, helps others, and leaves. Like that's her whole thing.
That's where historically you get so many intellectuals that like do the red letter version. They're like, he said some great things. Why aren't you doing those? Like,
right?
Like this disconnect, because like it's the whole he washed his disciples' feet. It's like, so if you're rich and saying, "Oh, this is God giving me fortune," well, the God you worship would say, "Spend that money housing other people." That would be the obvious allegory. Like, so the disconnect is just so confusing.
It is.
Yeah, I feel like in like today's like political climate, the Christians who are in charge right now, they use a version of the Bible that's just like the Pentateuch, the first 5 books of the Bible, and then Revelation.
Oh, and
nothing else
so
in
like
between.
not the New Testament.
I've been meaning to make content on our TikTok about this because it's like, oh yeah, so you're quoting the Old Testament. Oh, I can visibly see in your content you have tattoos. So guess who's not getting to heaven? Like,
right?
Yeah.
Are those 2 different cloths you're wearing?
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, does that shellfish taste good?
Right.
Oh, bad news for you, buddy.
Absolutely.
Oh, but it's okay because all is forgiven.
Yeah.
That's a whole thing. But yeah, and I mean, we can start even picking apart all that, but that's been done, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I suppose.
And it's still being done. That's like why we have content. So
it'll keep being done.
It'll keep being done because it needs to. Because there's a lot of it's a nature nurture thing. I mean, a lot of people we're raised with it because it's a good. I learned this in a marketing class. Most people, do you buy laundry detergent?
I do.
Why do you buy the brand you bought?
I don't know.
Probably because did your mom buy that one?
It's the brand my wife likes.
Right, yeah. Somebody else likes that one. You don't study, you don't look up which one to buy. You just go, oh, someone who influences me uses that. So there it is.
Now we're getting the whole like determinism, free will type thing.
We can go there. We can definitely go there.
We could. It's a tough one. I mean, you could do all the research, and it's ironic how well this metaphor works because, like, if you do all the research, you find out that all the detergent does the exact same shit.
In fact, there's nuts that do a lot of the work.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
They're super cool. They literally get soapy when you get them wet. It's wild.
Are they cheaper than detergent? Not so expensive.
No, because you can reuse them.
Oh, well, that makes a difference.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Oh,
but
that's it. We're getting demonetized.
Right.
Right there.
That's why we have a Patreon. Because it's almost bound to happen with us, with the way we'll talk about anything.
It's true.
Although, so I guess 2 things on the switching back to more of a philosophical thing. So lots of famous scientists have quotes about God. At the bottom of the glass of science is God staring back at you. So what's your take on that? Because one, theists quote it and they're wrong because they're deists. But also, I always find it interesting with atheists because typically you see atheistic worldview tries to use like a scientific frame, but you also have these great intellectual scientific minds that deistically, not theistically, but still talk about like a divinity aspect. So what are your thoughts on kind of like, at least personally, working through that?
Jesus. Wow, where do we even?
Yeah, that's a big one.
I think some people, when it comes to a belief in God, no matter how smart you are, because let's face it, we were talking about Stephen Meyer. He's brilliant.
Mm-hmm.
He knows his shit.
Yeah.
But there's an element of like personal conviction. So I know somebody who, one of the smartest people I've ever known in my life. He's an engineer. He was a part of our church, but he was always skeptical. Like for years, he always asked like the hard-hitting questions that we always struggled to answer. Well, he attempted suicide like twice, and it didn't work. He survived both times. So he was led to believe that God had a bigger plan for him. And I'm like, okay, if you had shot yourself in the mouth with a shotgun, do you think God would have made you survive that? All I have to say, I think people have very personal, experiential reasons for maintaining a belief in God that gives them some sort of sense of belonging and purpose and reward in the afterlife. A lot of people cannot handle the idea that once they die, they're gone. They can't handle the idea that this is the only life they have. The only impact they will ever have is what they're doing right now in this moment.
No pressure.
So,
well, that's just it, right? Like we all want to think like, okay, well, I just got to do well enough here, and then later it'll be fine. We're procrastinating. We're doing productive procrastination in this life.
Yeah.
Although, so on to an easier question. So it's what we do now that matters, but isn't that predetermined by the atomic physics that plays out in our psychology, which is just reacting to the environment and the internal stimuli of our DNA?
Easier question, you son of a bitch.
Yes.
So isn't it all?
I'm gonna say yes.
So it doesn't
to that.
Doesn't matter.
I don't know.
Yeah,
because this is where it gets tricky when you like. Cause this is my thing about atheism is it means there's a lot of discussion, which I think is good. It's why I tend to lean more that way as far as how people approach things. But then everything's just going to happen as it happens. So like it is just a cause and effect and cause and effect and cause and effect. The concept of free will is an illusion. It's just an effect of a different cause. But then this is where you get the theistic response of like, so it doesn't matter then. Then obviously there's nuance there, but I'd be curious your take on if it is just atomic materialism playing out through cause and effect, physics and psyche. Like you can't. It seems like it'd be hard to say like this is good, this is bad, because it just is. It is going to be.
I guess another way to ask, or a more like pointed question, is: do a lot of people, maybe you personally, but do a lot of folks who go through this find nihilism first? Like just nothing.
Yeah.
Just nothing matters because it all just kind of goes away.
And then how do you get out of it? How do you make meaning out of the concept that it is just atoms dancing? Welcome to the Metametheus Project.
Yeah, right. Seriously.
Softball questions. Jesus, you
we decided to tackle happiness, goodness, badness, and ugliness just to start our podcast. So.
Right.
I would say, like, at a certain point, yeah, what you're doing right now in 100,000 years is not going to matter. In a million years is not going to matter because we're all going to be dead. Our planet's going to be stardust circulating the Andromeda galaxy after it collided with our own. Like, yeah, but what are you going to do? You're here. You're here right now. Are you going to live the only life that you have with that energy that nothing you do matters? Like, life is a gift. It's very temporary. It's very fleeting, but it's still a gift.
So hedonism. Maximize pleasure,
Not
reduce
hedonism.
pain. Well, that's
No, not
yeah.
no, not necessarily.
What's
Because
the alternative?
hedonism is absorb as much or pursue as much pleasure as you possibly can, and that's not always it.
Why? Why is it not the best pursuit of action?
Because it's not the same for everybody.
Sure. So
some people might have that reaction. Sure.
So why doesn't everybody
absolutely
just?
My life, my time on this planet is temporary, so I'm going to do as much drugs, have as much sex as I possibly can, and that's fine. If that's your way of coping, go for it.
Dog's a hedonist. All right.
Dog's a hedonist.
No, she's just part of the family. Gets too much attention.
But not everybody thinks that way. You know, all you can do is what your instincts tell you to do while you're here.
So
until those instincts are silenced.
So are we under the impression that
for
some reason the human instinct is progressing towards a better morality? Back to our point of, like, if you're born at a different time, your sense of morality would be different. But we've been moving towards a humanism. So is that instinctual?
Yeah.
It seems pretty subjective, though.
But
Jesus.
Is it?
This is so far above my head. I'm trying, you guys. Really am.
I mean,
there's no right
maturity,
answers.
right? The maturity is in admitting that, right? Because that's the answer, right? It's like, well, we don't really know.
Our tag, our tag is we're fools. We're not.
Yeah. But I'd say, yeah, morality is absolutely progressing overall.
So towards what?
You know,
we'll find out when we get there.
Towards equality.
Yeah, and I would think, like, to try and, like, tie on when people talk about, like, oh, why, to answer the theist, where it's like, oh, well, everyone seeks their pleasure. Yeah, but it doesn't take much logical. This is, again, like the atheist point. You'll see, I don't know if Dawkins or Hitchens talk about this, but, like, it's pretty easy to be like, okay, so how about we live lives that maximize the pleasure for the most amount of people? Now you get into, like, the troubles with the democratic thing where, like, you know, it's 5 wolves and a sheep, back to a Jefferson quote. But at least there is this, like, mechanism of being like, okay, well, if we are, you know, atoms, then all the atoms are dancing. What can we do to make life best for the most amount of atoms? Because that's what we are and are, like, doing. So we can look at the human experience and try to maximize the positive potentials of that. And that's just logical. That doesn't take any divinity at all to, like, work through that in a reason and logic standpoint. Oh, you back?
Internet's. I don't know.
Oh, there's 2 of us. We can keep talking until you come back.
We're back?
Yeah.
Okay, here we go.
That's okay.
Oh, we're at the 2-hour mark. That's why. So the only trouble with our program, and I don't know if this is trouble because it might be good for us, at the 2-hour mark, the video's uploading as we're doing this, because that creates the highest quality because it doesn't have to, like, sit and then compress and then uncompress.
Gotcha.
So
yeah.
at about the 2-hour mark, like, the system starts having trouble, like, moving that file and stuff. So we'll have to start.
The software's attention span starts to run low.
Because originally our episodes were going to go 3 to 4 hours, and
yeah,
for everybody's sake.
But I think we've said quite a lot in this couple of hours. Let's end it. Can you, Deadpool, just kind of do the whole, like, logistics of where can people find you, that kind of stuff, just so people can follow up with all that?
Yeah, you can find me on TikTok, CaptainDadPool86. My YouTube channel is called Nerds and Heresy, or you can just type in CaptainDadPool86. I'm on TikTok I'm on Twitter and Instagram and all those other things. If you, I'm not hard to find. If you want to find me, it's not hard to do.
Fabulous. And we do recommend that you find him. Just quality stuff to think
Quality content.
Quality content.
Like, that's one of the things that
I'm hoping to produce more once my kids go back to school.
Right.
Looking forward to it. Thanks again for coming on. Big fan here. So
yeah. Thanks for having me. This was fun. Enjoyed it.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Until next time.
Really good questions.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Good answers.